Hi, welcome back to the continuation of functional programming discussion. So, in the previous session, we saw what is the functional programming and what is the advantage of having the functional programming. So, as I said, major advantage is um, implementation in multi-threading is very easy because everything is immutable in the functional programming world, right? Now, let's see um, what is one of the major drawback in Java and how we can make use of functional programming to overcome that drawback and how we can implement the functional programming in Java world. Okay, so basically in Java everything is oops, right? So if you're going to we think everything as an object, we think a car as an object, and the object will be having its own properties and we can modify those properties in multiple behaviors, right? The properties will be having its own behaviors. So the behavior we should be changing all the values, the state of the properties, right? The state of the object will be changing inside the behavior. So when multiple thread, okay, tries to access this car, okay, they will be sharing the car object, and there is a possibility, high chance, like one thread can change uh, the character of another thread, right? So um, in the oops world, okay, multi-threading is a big problem, and there are there are multiple ways to overcome the multi-threading issue, like adding the synchronization or making use of lock. But when using the functional programming, and in the functional programming we have everything as immutable, it is easy to run your Java code in a multi-threading environment. So that is one major advantage of using the functional programming in the Java world. Otherwise, the OOPS has its own strength like encapsulation, polymorphization, inheritance, abstraction. So those are very critical even for any application. So we cannot, just convert all our code into the functional programming. Okay. So only in the place where we want to compute something, where the computation need to happen across the multiple cores, okay, or we think the computation need to be very fast and we need to implement a multi-threading. So in that case we can write that piece of code using the functional programming. So that's the one place which I can think about taking the advantage of functional programming in the Java world. Okay, so how in Java, what are the different things they have provided to implement the functional programming, right? So we have a lambdas, we have a functional interfaces, we have default functions, we have method reference. So all these things, okay, they added as part of Java 8 for us to implement the functional uh, programming in Java. Okay, so what is lambda? Lambda is nothing but um, it's an anonymous function, right? Like we earlier we have an anonymous class, but we replace that with the anonymous function where the function don't have any name or don't have any return type, right? But it should be having a parameter and a function body. So that's all. So we can represent it, if any function using just a parameter and a function body, and this is what we call as a lambda expression. Okay, and then so what is functional interface? Functional interface is an interface with only one abstract method. Okay, and it can have a number of default method, and I will come back to about the default method. Okay, and once you have your functional interface, okay, you can implement the functional interface using the lambda expression. We can see that with an example. Okay, so basically we can we can use an annotation called functional interface on top of the interface to make sure the compiler validate this interface as a functional interface. Okay, for that we can make use of a annotation functional interface. So the compiler will validate and check the rules, right? this interface is having only one abstract method, otherwise it will throw us a same error, right? So that is the definition of functional interface. Okay, so what is a default method? Okay, why they add a default method? So basically in all the collections, okay, they added a new method called the for each, right? So if they are going to add a for each in the default in the interface, right, then all the subclasses need to be changed. To avoid that big change, they came up with a concept called default interface, and they made a for each as a default method. Sorry, they came up with the default method, and they declared a for each as a default method in all the collections. So that is the background behind the default method. And a functional interface can have any number of default method. Okay, so what are the different by default? Java is providing a lot of functional interfaces. We have a consumer functional interface, we have a supplier, we have predicates, and there are some legacy functional interface. Okay, we can see these with an examples. Okay, and so we saw the default functions, and what is a method reference is like so Java, as part of the functional programming, they also introduce a concept called method reference, where we doesn't need to call a method using the object. Instead, we can use the class name to call the method. So using the colon notation, we can do it. I can go over with an example. Okay, so just to avoid the traditional way of coding, they came up with the method reference. Okay, so these are the different things: lambda, functional interface, default functions, and method reference are used in Java to implement the functional programming in Java. Okay, in next session we can see what are these different functional interfaces with an example. Okay, so till that, if you have anything, please comment below this channel. Also, please subscribe to this channel for the future videos. Thank you. Bye.